So that being said, let's begin the meeting at 4:28. And the first order of business is to adopt the agenda. Are there any suggestions for changing the agenda?
Do we want to act on the resignation that was received?
We don't have to act on the resignation. I don't think.
I just thought it would be nice to acknowledge
No,
it.
I suppose.
How would you like, what form do you want to take? A motion or just an acknowledgement?
I'd like to move that we add an agenda item that is acknowledgement of board member resignation to number 5, reorganization.
Any objection? Done.
And can I add a second one?
You don't have a motion, I mean, a second, you want to combine it into one?
Oh, yeah.
You really don't need a second one.
Okay.
We're all in such obvious agreement. The action is formal even in the absence of a motion, depending on the issue.
I want to be sure that we include a discussion of testimony before the legislature, including opportunities in the future, which I think can be combined with number 10, but wanted to offer to explicitly add that to the agenda if people felt that was helpful.
Any objection? If there's time, we'll get to it. Anything else? Okay. We'll skip over public comment for the time being. And again, if a member of the public arrives, I'll make the opportunity to speak. The next item is approval of the minutes of 2 meetings. Let me first call for a motion regarding the minutes of the November 21st meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Do any of the three of you have items for discussion? I do.
For the 21st?
November 21st, yeah. You know, the agenda for this meeting is going to feel like sort of a circular a bit because different issues I think are going to continue to arise. The concern I have is that there is no reference in the November 21st minutes as presented by Laura to the entire discussion we had near the end of that meeting regarding the service agreement and what came to be called the deliverables. And plainly there was action taken by this board, whether there was a formal motion or not. And I guess I'm not going to ask that we revise the minutes for that meeting, but I am going to ask that a memo that I've written for the board be attached to the minutes of this meeting. And I have it in writing, and Laura, I can get it to you electronically after the meeting,
That would be helpful, thank
of
you.
course.
Would you like me to make copies now for people?
Why not? I'm sorry, I didn't, but our printer ran out of ink here in Mark, so. And so Chris is not on the board, and I don't mean to be secretive to hide this from her. What you'll find in this memo is the verbatim recording, I don't want to call it a transcript, my transcription of as close to a verbatim recitation of what happened in that context and what the agreement was among us. And in it I mentioned Tracy and John, I mentioned you, and mentioned Fran in it. And I guess we'll wait, and we can read it. But if, you know, it's a simple request that this memo be attached to the minutes of this meeting. And if necessary, I'll make a motion, and we can act on the motion so that the minutes of this meeting reflect this memo. Anyway.
And Jill, just to be clear, what you're talking about is on page 3 of the minutes of the meeting. There was discussion on criteria for decisions regarding service agreements, and then there is discussed November 7th memo from the Vermont NEA on service agreement with potential action. That's the portion of the minutes that you're kind of speaking to.
Yes, and so let me read this reasonably quickly. It's a long subject heading, but it says what I think I intended and what I think we intended as a group. It's a recitation of the agreement reached at the end of the November 21st meeting regarding drafting deliverables to be considered for inclusion in the service agreement with Vermont NEA. And I'll skip over the first paragraph since I addressed this to Laura. She concluded, I think, that she didn't hear any agreement during the meeting. As Laura will remember, I requested from her a recording of the meeting, and she got it to me before I realized I even had it. And then I got around to listening to it, and I did listen to it, and it's largely by virtue of disagreement, I guess, between Tracy and me about the nature of the assignment that the board, with her understanding, accepted. And so if you'll skip right to the bottom, the boldface words are my best attempt at a verbatim transcription. I think I got it at least 98% right. And it is this: you, referring to Tracy, and/or you and Martha, referring to Martha Gagne, will develop proposed language about the concerns you express, share with me, that would be Joel, before the next meeting to see if we can work out deliverables that are satisfactory to the school boards, in which case the board, by which I meant the appointees of the school boards, this board, I'm sorry, by which I meant this board, will agree to years 2 and 3 of the Vermont NEA proposal. Is that a fair statement? And then what happened was that John responded yes, and that Tracy said, I distracted myself, and a couple of seconds later agreed as well. No one dissented, though when all was said and done, Fran Brock did vote against tabling or leaving on the table the pending motion regarding that discussion. So as we go, I just want our record to be clear that the board, by consensus, reached agreement about the nature of the assignment. I offered anyone else to listen to the recording, and I think I specified the time at which these events occurred, something on the order of 10 minutes or so prior to the end of the meeting. So that's what I would like to see. We can do it one of two ways, or three ways. We can amend the minutes of the November 21st meeting to reflect this, but I think that's probably asking a little much. But we can do that easily enough. Or we can agree here to attach this memo to the minutes of this meeting by way of clarifying what actually took place at the November 21st meeting. Or we can operate under some formal motion to achieve these in the same end. One way or the other, this memo should find its way into the formal record of the board.
Happy to have the memo in the formal record. Would only be happy to do so if I have a similar opportunity to attach my own memo, which I would be happy to share with the board for review at the next meeting. And want to be clear and suggest the board be clear that all decisions by the board be made by formal board action with an articulated motion, not consensus, including the decisions we made at the start of this meeting. I think that would be helpful to avoid this confusion. And I think I think the contents of your memo, Joe, are useful to illustrate your intent. I think it's unfortunate that we have different, it appears that we have different standards and processes depending on who wants to bring something forward for discussion by the board.
Well, I don't understand.
I note that other people can draft things for board discussion, and it can simply be a board discussion item, and for some reason, there's an expectation that I not be able to do that without your approval, and perhaps the suggestion that somehow you are negotiating on behalf of Vermont NEA, and I am negotiating on behalf of the Vermont School Boards Association, or, let me check your wording, or the school boards, which I am not. Simply, my understanding was I was preparing a draft of deliverables to facilitate improved discussion by the board. And I'd be happy to put that in a memo and attach it as well.
And I'd be happy to agree to it if you would listen to the recording of the meeting where this agreement was reached, as I suggested you do, so that we could have avoided 2 full more months of disagreement over something as basic as whether we agreed to an assignment or not. I imagine that if I asked people for their indistinct memories of what happened there would at least be an acknowledgement that the assignment that you took on was to draft something to give to me so that we could consider it together before having a discussion.
I apologize if there was confusion about that. I never would have agreed to negotiate with you deliverables for an
It's not
agreement.
about negotiation, it was about a draft, I'm just reviewing the draft. Okay, so in any event, my request is on the floor. Is there agreement? If we have to make it by motion, we can make it by motion.
I guess I think I heard you say, Tracy, that, and I agree at some level in terms of process, it would make sense that even changes to the agenda, we keep it clean and we say in the future we, do that kind of thing by motion. So I don't have a problem doing this by motion is essentially what I'm saying. And I think what we're talking about is saying, this is really what you're stating, your understanding based on your listening to the recording is
No, this
of
is-
what transpired.
No, it is a transcription of what took place at the meeting, John. It's
The-
not my rendition.
Well, this part is a transcription of what took place at the meeting.
Yes. Yes, everything else is an explanation of how I got to that point.
I'm happy to make a motion to put this into today's minutes, if that's easy enough.
Yeah,
Do you think that's
well,
easier?
Laura, do you have that? So
I think
it would be a
that was.
motion, it would be a motion to attach this memo to the minutes of this meeting.
I have that as a motion.
Is there
So
s-
I will second that motion for the purpose of discussion at least.
I want to point out that by virtue of it being a motion, whatever the action of the motion will result in this memo being included in the minutes of this meeting because it's a document that was considered. So,
So I'd like to make a motion to amend to also include agreement that I have the opportunity to attach a similar memo.
I'm even happy to second that.
I have no objection to your doing that. I don't understand for why board action is necessary for you to have that.
I want to be clear, a meeting from now, that I can present a memo and it will be attached.
Okay.
I'm just puzzled on how we can be documenting minutes of future events.
Asking for, then expect that I'll vote against the motion in approval of the minute.
And that's certainly right, I'm just,
Yeah.
have never in my board days come across where we've
Perhaps
put
Joel's,
anticipated
perhaps Joel's memo can wait.
actions.
What you're asking for is the opportunity to submit in agreement for this being submitted,
Yes.
essentially.
Submit,
You can attach it to this meeting.
I understand the words, but there's no object to the verb. You want to submit what?
A memo,
About what?
my version
You
My
have a different
interpretation,
version of what happened
I
at the
clearly
meeting?
interpret this very differently.
Yes, understand, this is not an interpretation. These are the words on the recording. Right? So if you want to listen to the words on the recording, if you don't take my word for it, feel free. But don't expect a welcoming, a welcome receipt of a memo that characterizes this as opposed to uses the words themselves.
I would characterize this differently, and I would characterize the significance of this discussion and this matter differently.
Mhm.
And I think it's important that I take an opportunity to do that.
Mhm.
So there's a motion to amend. Tracy made. John, I think I heard you second it.
I don't know what the motion to amend reads.
Uh,
I don't care.
Tracy made a motion that she will be allowed to attach a similar memo on this issue to the minutes.
Of this meeting. To be
I
submitted.
think Tracy needs to
To
be
submitted,
clear,
to be
given
submitted.
what Peggy said about attaching to a future
My
meeting.
preference would be to amend these minutes in the future and attach it to these minutes, but I would also be willing to take the opportunity to attach it to the minutes of today's meeting.
What's your motion then? Is it to attach to a
I wanna
future
say-
meeting? That's fine to me. I just wanna know what you're trying to say.
My preference would be to the same minutes that this memo is attached.
I think my memo was to attach to today's meeting, so you're asking to attach something to today's minutes.
Yep.
Okay, forgive me. Review the motion with the amendment.
So here's what I have, and if I've misstated it, please correct me. Peggy made a motion to attach Joel's memo to the minutes of this meeting. John seconded it. Tracy made a motion to amend that motion that will allow her to attach a memo drafted by her on this issue to the minutes of this meeting.
All right? All agreed? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
On the amendment, correct?
On the amendment, yes. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Now, I have discussion on the original motion.
I don't think we have. Do we have,
We
Did you-
haven't had discussion yet.
no, did everybody
Did the-
vote?
I don't know, did you vote aye for the
I
amendment?
did not.
Are we still on the amendment?
All those against?
I am, it doesn't make sense to me, sorry, my
So
head
the
jet.
the amendment fails.
So we're back to the original
So
motion.
we're back to the original motion. Tracy, that having been said, I don't think the board's in a position to prevent any of us from submitting a memo
That was my thought.
about.
I think you have the right at any point to bring forth a memo, so it didn't make sense for me to project future inclusions in the minutes. That didn't make sense, but it certainly would make sense if you brought it to the next meeting, that we review it and say yea or nay. I have no issue with that whatsoever.
And I think you have pretty much all of us saying out loud to that effect. I haven't heard John, but I suspect he agrees that you should be permitted to
Well,
do that with or without this motion.
I'm just feeling we need to be 100% clear. What we're saying is because the memo doesn't exist, then it doesn't make sense to say you can attach it, but that anyone who brings anything has a right to have it automatically attached or have a right to make a motion to have it attached.
To have a make a motion
That's my
attached.
understanding.
You know, we could go on and on about something as simple as this. One can imagine a screed being written, not by Tracy, but just some mythical creature out there on a board could write a screed full of innuendo, full of misstatements, full of untruths, and somehow purport to have the right to have it attached to the minutes. That's not what we're talking about. But we don't have a product to consider for attachment here.
Well, the screed would be attached if there was a motion to do so, because then it would be in the record,
But
correct?
that motion was that motion to amend was just defeated. Right?
No, but just in general, just for my edification, if someone did write something, even if it was offensive and untrue, as soon as there was a motion to attach it, even if the motion fails, it becomes part of the public record.
Probably. but that doesn't.
which is, I think, what you said about your memo back
That's
when,
correct.
after we finished the motion.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so I can go back, you know, it's where we are, it's the way this, where we're looking. So, I think we're back to consideration of the motion, in chief, as Peggy presented it. Is there any further discussion?
I do have questions and discussion, and I'll try to keep it brief, but I guess, Joel, what I'm hearing you say is, before you reviewed the recording, you had a recollection that seemed very different than what Tracy's recollection was and what she came forth with. Therefore, you said, I want to see the recording and I want to get clear on this.
Yes.
Okay. You did that, and as a result, you wrote this memo.
No, I did that, and as a result, I communicated it to Tracy.
Yep.
And frankly, I think the three management team members were on all this. That's what I did.
Okay.
And then, you know, this is dated the 15th, but I didn't write it today. I forget, it was in the last several days that I drafted this. And it may have come about by virtue of Tracy, my becoming aware that Tracy submitted her draft to the full board without any interaction with me.
And so there's a couple of different pieces, I think. One is, what you're taking exception to is the fact that whatever she drafted didn't go to you first for review before going to the board. I just want to be clear.
It wasn't about, that's fair. The word review is not
Or-
what we had in mind
Yeah.
at this table. It was for us to consider together what we thought, and if we could resolve differences between ourselves about this notion of deliverables,
Okay.
then there was a better chance of bringing it, as it turns out, to you and
Okay.
for
So
resolution.
the details of the deliverables themselves, or the details of concern about the deliverables, or the whole thing? Because I'm reading this, and again, this was a while ago, it's not clear in my memory.
I did not read, when I wrote this, I had not read through Tracy's submission carefully, so I think the answer is, it was about varying from the agreement. And it wasn't so much about varying from the agreement as wanting the record of the board to reflect what actually occurred. And I don't hold Laura responsible at all for not discerning what happened during the last 10 minutes of that meeting. It was confusing. But it wasn't confusing to me because I was trying to chair and facilitate basically getting to yes about the service agreement. So I was focused on it, perhaps more, I was focused on it.
But I'm hearing you say your concern was more of a process concern than a content concern.
Now, I don't want to include the issue of content in this. My concerns about content are separate and distinct.
Okay.
It's not an either or, it's not an and, it's without reference to the actual substance of the draft that Tracy provided. It's about the assignment that
That's what I'm trying to get at.
that the recording of the meeting reflects occurred that isn't reflected in the minutes as yet.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a very fair questions.
So as the person who takes the minutes and who have, in the last year and a half, concerns have been raised that I've said too much, that I've left things out, that I haven't said enough. Motions have to be recorded in the minutes, and so I think that if you wanna make sure that action is understood clearly by everybody, including me, who's trying to capture it. I was so confused at the end of that conversation, even though I listened to it, and again, we have it recorded for my convenience. Many meetings exist without any original source to go to. And they could have a technical failure. I mean, my batteries could die, I could not have turned it on, all sorts of things could happen. It would really be helpful to me if you want something to put it in motion, that way I can make sure the minutes reflect it.
Which was Tracy's point 15 minutes ago, I think, at some level.
Well, it's a different point, a different context, but they're sufficiently related. We can act more, I guess formally is the wrong word, mechanistically, that way, if it suits your purposes, that's fine. But there's no need to, and that doesn't mean that the action shouldn't appear in the minutes. That's it. And that's all, you know, so this took place, there was an agreement, it isn't reflected in the minutes, I'd like, therefore, the official record of the board to include reference to the agreement that was reached.
And I disagree that that was the agreement, so.
Do you disagree with the words?
I
In
disagree
boldface?
with the agreement. I disagree with what you're, the way you're
Are you
positing.
disagreeing with the boldface wording in that memo? Because I've
I
asked you to.
truly believe that you took that slice of the meeting and accurately represented that. But I believe there was more to the discussion.
Which I described before and after. Okay.
And
So
I
there is a
just want to
motion.
tell you what my understanding was.
But
You don't need to.
from a pure standpoint, I guess what I would
No,
say
only
is,
your opinion matters.
No, I've said. for
You're
this-
saying I can't attach my opinion.
I did not say
He
that.
voted, with you, I was the one that said.
I was the
future
first person in
open
this room to agree with you about that. Try not to attack because you want to. John, what were you saying?
I guess from a pure standpoint, I mean, I understand the full discussion and I understand the challenge of the discussion. But if I look at this and you're asking me to say, you want me to vote yes because this is what happened, and I see two places where there's dots in there, I don't know what the heck is, where the dots are, if that was just a pause in the conversation, or if there was a whole piece that really does make the intent
That's
different.
fair. I will tell you that I believe that there was simply a very short pause. And no, I did not intend to omit any words that might have been uttered in the context of that boldface.
Right, and I hear you saying that, but looking at this the way it's written, it makes it challenging, and that if what you were saying is you simply wanted to say, this is what was said in the meeting, you're asking for also agreement with everything you put in the lead up and everything you put and I guess the follow-up is fairly factual, and that could be bold-faced almost as well. If you're saying, you heard me say yes and Tracy say I distracted myself and then yes, that's almost a bold-face
Yeah,
right there.
it didn't lend itself to.
I got that, but the stuff
Transcription.
the stuff up front is a lot more than just this is what was said in the meeting. And again, I barely had time to read it because we're talking while we're doing it and fully digest it. So I just want to say that as part of the discussion.
All right. Well,
The main motion hasn't been acted on
I
yet.
understand. Thank you.
And just for clarification, for the main motion to be acted on, there needs to be
All four of you.
all four
There
of
is
us need to
there is
approve.
no action available for this board of directors without
All four of us agree.
consensus.
Correct.
That's why the notion of consensus actually works.
But either way, this gets attached to the minutes.
Yes.
Can I move to table approval of the minutes? Table the motion until the next meeting, which would allow me to have the opportunity to present something as well.
So you just moved to table this motion and approval of the November meeting minutes?
Yeah.
Would that incorporate listening to the recording as well?
I draft my own memo.
That's not responsive to John's
I
question.
don't know whether I'm gonna listen to the memo or not.
That's responsive to his question. Okay.
Is there a second?
Is there a second to the motion to table?
I will second that motion.
Any discussion? I'm not even sure it's debatable. It probably is. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This is the motion to table. Aye.
Aye.
I disagree. I vote no. So we're back to voting on the motion itself, and if it fails, frankly, it's fine, as long as this memo is attached to the minutes of this meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The motion fails, and the minutes will reflect.
But the minutes haven't been approved yet.
The minutes for this meeting.
The minutes, what?
This is a motion to attach these to the minutes. That motion failed, but the minutes themselves, there's a John Peggy motion we still have to deal with, just so you know. And then we have to go to December minutes,
approve
the minutes.
Of November.
Forgive me, we're talking about attaching.
That motion failed.
Listen to me.
No, I understand what will be attached. The memo will be attached as part of the record of this
Of
discussion.
this meeting?
Yes,
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Continue. We have-
because it's part of the record. But I'm just reminding you that you still have to vote on approving the minutes.
Of November 20th.
Yes.
I know that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, but I want to say out loud again, the motion that just failed will, the reporting of that motion will include attachment of this memo to the minutes of
So
this
that
meeting.
people know what
Of this
we
meeting.
talked about.
Yes, okay.
Correct.
Okay, is there any further discussion of the minutes from November 21st, 2019? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving those minutes as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. There you go. I have a markable number in my office, a sign that says, as a result of this meeting, nothing will change. So, the next item of business is consideration of the minutes from the December 20th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Second.
Forgive me, I'm just gonna find it.
Oh, I'll correct the typo, thank you. Oh, Mayor,
Yeah.
and I had two proofers. And I take total responsibility for it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None. We'll move on to the reorganization, item number 5. And Laura, I think I'll yield to you regarding an update on the annual membership meeting. I'm not quite sure what even we have in mind for that, other than to consider the minutes.
Well, since only 2 of the 6 board members at that time were able to attend the annual member meeting, I thought that the member meeting minutes should be attached because they don't appear online, they don't show up till a year from now. And there were a couple questions that the membership had or comments made, and I thought the board needed to be informed about them. So rather than trying to summarize or interpret, I thought the minutes was the cleanest way to present that to you. So it was just for the record.
Would you like to, and we don't have to act on them, obviously, we don't adopt the.
No,
approve the
those
minutes
will be
from the annual
approved,
meeting.
the membership will approve those minutes or not.
So will you point out to us the 1 or 2 questions that you wanted us to, be aware
I
of?
have in my packet the 2018 minutes.
I do as well.
October
And then all
18th.
fairness, I didn't
Yeah,
recognize.
yeah,
I think it's November
It's the
8,
long- it's the long-
2019.
So
Perhaps we can do
I
this at the next
pulled the
meeting.
wrong minute.
Okay.
Um,
Sounds the same there.
That's what I would,
So I was like, I
Do
don't
you
remember
want,
being
why
there.
don't I pull them?
good, all right.
They're very brief, and so we can deal with this at this meeting.
That would be fine. That's what, when I hesitated about the December 20th minutes, it was this
You
that I
you know,
was
the
thinking.
problem that happens is that
Really?
18 minutes are in the 19 meeting folder because that's when you approve them.
You got
And
an
so
explanation for
at
everything.
least, I'm not totally losing it.
I've been there.
Okay.
So I will do that. Do you want me to do it this minute? or
I
can
guess so, why don't we just get it done?
Do you want me to do it from my computer?
And we'll hold off considering anything
No, I'll
in
do
your
it.
absence.
I'll do it.
Meanwhile, we'll the world is truly going crazy. So this is what you do when you're a retired political junkie. You spend your life with MSNBC on in the background, as background music. And I don't know if you realize just how historic today is, but today is the day that the House of Representatives of the United States of America transmitted articles of impeachment of our president to the Senate, and whatever circus is associated with it. That's not an everyday occurrence. One?
Is it the fourth time?
Well, third actually, because Nixon resigned before. You know how I know that? Because MSNBC is background music.
So it's item 5 on page 2 are the comments, and I'll update the Dropbox a bit in the future when people go to find this meeting, they'll be correct.
Thank you.
So you can see who attended, and they were just formalities until the question and answer part.
When you're ready, let me know. Laura, who is Zach McLaughlin?
Superintendent,
Springfield superintendent.
I think it's listed in the,
Oh, up above, yeah.
their role if we know it.
I can picture him, I just don't know who he was. All set? Laura, I'll yield to you, I think I know what you're up to here, which is fine. Do you wanna have
No,
any discussion about the questions raised?
Well, I think that,
As they apply to a
you know, it's nice to have a compliment from Zach. As far as the last question by Elizabeth that asked us to look at data, that's something that Bobby Joe talked to her more specifically about afterwards. And something that we will think about, what data can be generated for districts and what's useful, so that's something that management will work on. And as far as Neil Odell's question about our role around information and statewide bargaining, I think that will, it's an item on this agenda, so you can see that the members have questions about it, and we're about to address it on the agenda and perhaps through the service agreement, so just wanted to let you know
Okay.
what was asked and said, so that you're aware, since you weren't able to be there. I think this is the first year they haven't had all the board members there to hear it themselves, so.
Well, I appreciate you raising it for us. Any further questions about the annual meeting? The next item is election of, or affirmation as is stated here of chair and vice chair.
And I think I put them in the wrong order, so I think the protocol came before the wrong minutes. So if you want to flip to
I'm
the
sorry.
protocol in the packet.
Oh,
I would like to speak to that if I can have the opportunity.
maybe. We're just trying to find it. Well, John, the floor is yours. What would you like to say?
So, I have something that I want to say, and I took the opportunity to write it because I didn't want to lose my train of thought as I was going through, so just please bear with me as we go through this. So, as we begin discussion on the election and affirmation of board officers, I'd like to start by just reviewing that protocol adopted on June 30th, 2019. And as we know, last week Joel accepted an invitation by the Senate Ed Committee to provide an update on how the VEHI board is functioning post-Act 11. You know, what I was not aware of at the time, but have become aware of, is that when Tracy became aware of that invitation, which happened because I guess Sue Siglowski from VSBA monitors the legislative calendar, she informed Tracy, asking whether she was aware that Joel had been invited. Tracy contacted Joel, asked that he decline the invitation until such time as they could both attend. Tracy pointed to protocol number 4 of the protocol we have in front of us now as the basis for her request that Joel decline the invitation. Rather than agree to work with Tracy and the committee's assistant to reschedule, Joel stated he could appear in front of the committee so long as he made it clear he was representing his own views.
John, I have to interrupt you and roll you out of order. We're here to, unless you, are you going to offer some sort of critique of the protocol, or you just gotta?
Well, I'm
take
gonna
me
make
to task for
I'm gonna
doing what I
work
did
my way to a motion, is what I plan on doing.
That addresses the protocol.
Well, that addresses the election and affirmation of board officers. So, I was not aware of all that initially, and as everyone knows, I sent an email out last Wednesday night, if I remember my dates right. I simply read the agenda packet materials in preparation for this meeting, read the protocol, and then it happened to be very soon afterwards that I read Joel's email of January 8th at 4:07 p.m. His email appeared to me in direct contradiction of the protocol included in the agenda packet, which led me to send out the email I sent on January 8th at 8:28 p.m. So in the protocol, which as we discussed we're looking at, it says, you know, quote, the authority to speak for or otherwise represent VEHI and the board is granted jointly to the chair and vice chair, and that separately neither person is authorized to speak on behalf of VEHI or the board, except as is consistent with a communication protocol, unquote. So when a legislative committee asks a board member to provide an update on VEHI board operations, the person being invited is being asked to represent VEHI through that testimony. I don't see, and I mentioned this, you know, I don't see how anyone could say that it would be consistent with that protocol to appear before the committee with a lengthy testimony regarding on how the board is functioning and suggest that that person is not representing VEHI. So protocol 4 makes no differentiation between an official statement from the board and representing one person's views. It says neither the chair or nor the vice chair is authorized to speak separately on behalf of VEHI or the board. When a committee asks for an update from the chair of the board on how a committee is functioning, that person is representing the board, irrespective of whether or not this testimony starts with, I'm not representing an official position of the board. So, my position is that, the protocol wasn't followed. Tracy's request to, defer testimony until she could be part of it, was not, followed or granted, and that the testimony really was, in my opinion, from everything I see, not accurate and can be construed as misleading on where we stand. So, I can't really support that, and I have a document that I went through a lot of, work to prepare that really shows the places that I feel the testimony isn't accurate, isn't correct, and I'd like to have that included as an attachment to today's minutes of this meeting. And based on that, I would make the motion to elect Tracy as the chair of the board until the first meeting held after the 2020 annual meeting.
There's a second.
I'll second.
And I do have this,
Discussion? Oh,
well, I can hand this out and go through, but again, this brings us in different directions, so we can focus on the election first if we want to.
you'll all remember I asked John, or I asked anybody if there was any disagreement with my testimony, so you waited till now to flesh it out.
Well, I think at the time, I responded that I didn't believe that you should be testifying.
No, that's not my question. In what respects, I asked in what respects did anybody disagree with what I said? And you didn't offer anything until now. I didn't miss anything, did I? You haven't said.
When did you make that request? In your email that you
I
sent?
responded to your email. Or no, it might have been my private one to you the next morning.
With all due respect, that is probably appropriate discussion for the board, which I think John
With all
is
due
prepared
respect,
to
I'm
initiate.
I'm speaking. So, did you read the communication protocol?
I did,
The communication protocol.
I did.
This is not the communication.
I understand that, and I did,
And you think okay,
yes.
all right. You think that what I did was representing the board before the Senate Education Committee. Is that what you think?
I think that if you bring a 5-page testimony to speak about how the VEHI board is doing, as a member of the board, never mind as the chair, that it is representing the board. I honestly don't see how it could be anything different, and that was my point that I made to you.
Yeah, you made that point, and I.
You disagree, I understand you disagree.
Tracy, let me ask you a question. Has the committee invited you to testify?
The committee has, and I declined,
Okay.
pending an opportunity to discuss with the board, which I've asked to have on
No,
the
I-
agenda as number 10.
Well, like I said, we were probably gonna go in circles
Yep.
during this meeting. Okay. All right. Does anybody believe in signing on to this board that you sign away your right to have and offer an opinion about the board as opposed to policies adopted by the board?
I think that's,
I'm asking that question.
can I tell you what I think about the question? I think that's an unfair question. I think the question before us is, what is our commitment to follow the procedures, policies, and agreements that we've reached? And I think we have a motion on the table that is up for discussion, and I think we should focus on that.
We gotta focus on it. We are focusing on it. The underpinnings for the motion are probably subject to discussion, don't you think?
John, do you have
So my
something you want to
question-
make copies of?
I have copies, I guess what I'm saying is, if what we're saying is we, rather than moving directly to a direct consideration or acting on the motion, what we need at some level is my basis for making the statement I made, that I'm prepared to go in that direction right now. and walk
What
through it.
direction is it? What-
The direction of explaining why I feel, why I feel is inappropriate and what I feel is misleading about it.
My question is, do you have the right, you make it personal. You have the right to express an opinion about how you think Act 11 is affecting the operations of the
I'm not gonna answer that.
I'm not answering you. I'm
As a
asking you.
member of this board, am I free to say anything I want related to the topic in a public setting where I've been requested to testify?
Well, I don't think it matters, John. If-
I think it does, too.
Yeah, I feel like this is like cross-examination or something.
It is.
There's no, well, that's not what a board does, a good operating board does.
Oh,
is
I'm sorry,
cross-examine.
this video, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I would use.
All right, listen, why don't we cut through this? You want whatever you've written attached to the minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's gonna happen, it's a matter of course, right? There's no reason.
I think you'd like an opportunity to speak to it.
There's a motion.
When, either
There's a-
now or after the motion.
Well, what I made a motion was for the election of the chair.
Yeah.
I've also requested that this be attached to the minutes, and
And that request has been granted by act of law, by dint of, by
Right,
operation of law.
we did agree previously that we would do this through motion. I think I know where the motion's going, but we might as well do it and get it over with.
I call motion, I
Okay.
call question.
So the question is essentially to change the officer protocol so as, if I understand it, so as,
What would be the motion?
yeah, I guess-
To elect Tracy as chair of the board until after the 2020 annual meeting.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Nay.
Nay. Thank you. You're right. The motion fails.
So I think I should make a motion that these be attached to the minutes, and we can go through this quickly. The minutes of today's
Yeah,
meeting.
I'm just trying to think sequentially here. That your motion doesn't have anything to do with the election of officers, but it will be relevant as I think
Well, he's
we
already made
discussed
the
earlier
request.
under item 10.
Well, and I think to what you said before, when I said, when you said it is part of the discussion because your reason, we have to understand your reason, I think it became part of the discussion of election of officers. And again, I'm happy to do this quickly, we don't, we could,
Yeah, right. Everything's quick on this.
well,
You have a motion, you want to consider it now. I think it's out of sequence, I don't care. I think it's out of sequence, and I think there might be, in the context of a later discussion, reason to consider whether you want to do it, but that's fine. John's made a motion that I think we all agree is actually unnecessary, but for form's sake, to attach to the minutes of this meeting a memo he prepared regarding, I guess, my testifying before the Senate Education Committee. Is that a?
the title of the memo is concerns regarding the testimony that you said, yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
So I guess
Passes to send.
the two gets attached without board
Will
sanction.
you send me the electronic version to attach?
Yeah.
And Laura, about mine, to remind me.
If I don't get it, I'll remind you, yes.
No, you won't get it, you'll have to remind me. Okay. By the way, I won't even ask, but I'll assume that everybody recognizes if I find something with which I disagree, yeah, there's no move that I have the opportunity to submit. And we can go on like this until we no longer go on.
Which suggests
Just for
why
the-
it would be useful to follow the agreed upon.
Just for the
protocol.
record, in case we don't get to it later, there is absolutely nothing that I have done inconsistent with our protocols or good practice. If you have been present for how the legislature works, you would understand that they don't typically, they try sometimes, they don't typically schedule at witnesses' convenience. As Tracy will acknowledge, I tried, I didn't succeed, to get it scheduled for the rare opening that she had in her schedule, and was informed by legislative counsel, I think that I forwarded to you all a day beforehand, that the committee was only going to have this discussion under the heading of updates when I testified, which was last Thursday at about 3:15. Typically, witnesses change their own schedules in order to make an appearance before the legislature.
May I
I
respond?
also understand,
Sorry.
you can respond, but that's the way it is. But I also understand, Tracy, did you seek to have the committee decline to have me testify?
I had no communication with the committee or anyone on the committee.
Oh,
I'd like to add that
You
while you reported to me that you did seek to amend or reschedule an opportunity to testify, and that is exactly what you told me. I want to affirm that. I was not included in communications at any point with the committee regarding scheduling before, during, or after my outreach. And the committee's follow-up was an invitation to me to testify at my convenience.
good.
So I have a different perception about the committee's willingness to have worked with us.
When did you receive that invitation?
I don't know that.
Was it after my testimony?
Yes.
Perhaps I spoke with the chair about making sure that he did this. He was going to invite you anyway, but I encouraged him to do so. There's so much that is wrong with this discussion, as I think you all know.
I agree.
There's just so much wrong with this discussion.
I agree, but I think we disagree on what's wrong.
Well, that's part of what's wrong, isn't it? And I don't readily see a way of overcoming it, so let's move on.
Can I just note that dinner's out there?
Let's get through a few of these things.
Just trying to make sure you're
All right.
going.
The appointment of corporate officers. Now, I could be wrong, but I think I'm the president
On specific matters only.
on specific matters only, but there's no other president.
No one has been appointed president. The chair has been appointed to act as president in very limited
Yes,
circumstances.
but
That's the current status. That's what the minutes reflect.
that's,
Can I ask a clarifying question? That is because we're in the status of waiting to look at updating our governance documents?
at a
Or-
minimum.
My understanding is until you heard from Rob and made a bigger
I just
long-term
wanted to make
decision,
sure.
there were certain items you wanted to make sure were covered, and those were delegated to the chair.
Mm,
Those minutes were approved as written.
Laura, stop, please. The minutes reflect that the chair is the president,
No,
For
for
specific
specific
items.
items only,
Right.
correct.
but there is no president for other items.
That is correct,
That's all I was trying to say. So
I think that you
am
and I
saying the
agree, you are not the
appointment-
president, you are the president to act in certain
Yeah, I
circumstances.
don't wanna be the president, but the fact is that that's come my way. But there is no president otherwise, and that probably will remain that way for a while, until we resolve things. All right.
There's also no secretary.
There's no secretary now, and so,
And I would be willing to step up to that in whatever capacity for the foreseeable future, if we need somebody. I don't know what the function is, but I mean, I have a sense, but
Would you like me to speak to that formally?
yeah, go ahead, you do it, and see what comes out.
So the secretary is responsible for keeping the books and the records of the board. That includes making sure that minutes are kept and appropriate. It does that as staff,
Mhm.
but the ultimate responsibility, if it wasn't done, would be the secretary.
Mhm.
And when the annual meeting notice goes out to members, the secretary has to sign off that the meeting notice was out according with the bylaws. The secretary is also, through the resolution of delegation of authority that you just updated, has the ability to do some financial transactions. Again, you could reread the resolution, but those are at the will of the board.
Should it be needed if the trust administrators or whoever.
Right, it's like a third person in
It's
the
a third
company.
check
We've
signer.
never used the secretary for that.
Similar to
but-
my own organization.
So
That's what I
Similar
thought.
to any organization,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'll not nominate John to serve as secretary, as long as he is able.
I think that overstates the nature of the assignment, but I think we understand what you're saying.
As long as he's here.
Is there a second?
Oh, did you
I
nominate
moved
her?
it.
Sorry,
I can't.
sure, I'll second.
Any discussion? Would you like to make a nominating speech?
I
No,
will
you
do my,
wouldn't.
I will do my very best.
More than that, no one can ask. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? None? No one. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, we have dealt with item 5.
We have a new T though, the resignation that was added.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wonder if we could acknowledge
Of course.
Peggy's service.
This would be
I
Peggy.
mean, Fran's service, sorry.
That would be the wrong acknowledgement and the wrong way to do so.
And acknowledge and thank her for her service in the minutes.
How long was Fran in the Barnwell?
Since the beginning of time, otherwise known October 1st, 2018.
Yeah. And
Is there any objection?
Should we make a motion?
You
Or
really
just
think
have the
that's
minutes
necessary?
reflected?
I think the minutes can reflect consensus about that.
can someone share that with us?
Yes, of course. I'll be happy to. I've already commiserated with her. It's 5:30. I'm not quite sure what your druthers are. Should we have a bit of the discussion about the One Care of Vermont attribution issue before reading?
I would say yes, but
Why don't we do that? Is that all right? Why don't we, we've allocated a long time for it, so why don't we go 15 minutes and see where we are and see what you'd like to do, all right? So at 5:55, we'll sort of halt for a moment and check in with each other about it. You all know we had the December 20th meeting for the purpose of getting some information beyond what we could get from the pages, if that's what they are, of Vermont Digger and elsewhere, about what amounts to, at this point, a request from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont to us to enable it to participate, I guess, in the attribution of 19,000 of our insured to One Care Vermont. And the array of issues or concerns or headings, I guess, that has, has arisen include sort of money, primary care, the larger notion of transparency, which I don't think we really took up with the folks who visited with us in December. That said, I think I should yield the floor, Mark, to you for review of the proposal about how we should act.
proposal,
Made a recommendation.
There's a recommendation
Materials.
from Mark in the materials.
but I'm also prepared to make a motion, but I can do that after.
Why don't we hear Mark's first?
So you have a 2-page document from me, it's dated January 8th, it was in your board materials, and it was my recommendation, it is my recommendation to this board that we decline Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont's invitation There should be 19,000 of our covered lives at the ACO in 2020. We can, and I think should, revisit the matter for 2021 after we secure more data and information about how OneCare Vermont performs in 2019, how it performed. We assess developments that are unfolding in this particular year, and also we take more time as a board in a more measured and leisurely is not the right word, but I think you know what I'm getting at. We take the time we need to really fully understand the model. The contract that Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont is still, as I understand it, negotiating with OneCare.
Mark, years in this context are calendar years, is that right?
That is correct.
Keep going.
That's my understanding. We also know that there is an audit that I believe is due sometime this spring by Doug Offer, the state auditor. And I think that document should shed more light on OneCare's internal operations and allow us to assess how effective and transparent this organization is. It has had issues with demands for greater transparency, beginning with its resistance to opening its board meetings to the public initially, a matter that was eventually resolved with legislative involvement and negotiations between the Office of the Healthcare Advocate and OneCare Vermont. Recently, Mike Smith, the head of AHS, has insisted that OneCare become a nonprofit and that it adopt measures to become more transparent as a way of securing more state funding or making him feel more comfortable among more state funding. There simply was not time for this board, and frankly, it was very challenging for the management team to undertake a very comprehensive and reasonably paced inquiry into OneCare, given that we only had formal announcement of the fact that Blues intended to attribute our lives to it on September 27th of 2019. I have seen nothing in the record to date that leads me to believe that OneCare Vermont is in a position to lower costs or to dramatically improve quality. And its quality record, I think, is questionable at best and begs a lot of questions. And I think we need more data, both about its costs and its quality measures before we make a decision about attributing lives to it. To return to the transparency question for a moment, Green Mountain Care Board, and attending its meetings and reading its materials, is also demanding a great deal more of OneCare Vermont in that vein, including designing and posting performance dashboards so that the public has access to information. We know there will be additional quality measures. We know that Green Mountain Care Board and the Office of the Healthcare Advocate are very concerned about how much money OneCare Vermont is investing in population health management, given that its population is expanding. There are also concerns about how many individuals are currently getting complex care coordination through OneCare Vermont. I was reading through a document today by the Office of the Healthcare Advocate. If you look at Blue Cross Blue Shield's exchange population, there's about 20,000 people under the Blues umbrella on the exchange who are currently attributed to OneCare Vermont. Yet only 2% of its high-risk and very high-risk patients are actually getting care coordination from OneCare Vermont at present, even though Blue Cross has had commercial lives in the exchange, in OneCare since 2014. And I think it's important to point out that while a lot of attention's been devoted to 2018, because that's the first full year of the risk-sharing arrangement with OneCare Vermont and Blue Cross and other entities, in fact, the ACO's been in existence since 2014. There's a lot of data we can look at over the last 6 years. I also think it's going to be important for us to see how the debate around Medicaid plays out. OneCare Vermont is requesting an additional $13.3 million in Medicaid funding. A significant portion of that would have to come from the state. OneCare Vermont's clinical model is predicated very heavily on expanding access to primary care. And I've been a very strong proponent of expanding access to affordable, high-quality primary care, so I have no qualms with that mission or mandate. What I do have concerns about is that we have a serious shortage of primary care physicians in Vermont. And I see nothing in OneCare's budget or in its public messaging that suggests that it is prepared to deal with that problem or has a way to deal with it. And so I have to question how successful the model can be if the foundation of it, the primary care community, is facing shortages. I guess finally, in addition to wanting to see a whole lot more information from OneCare Vermont, from the auditor, it'll also be interesting to see, I mentioned this previously, the results of any investigation that may arise in the future because of whistleblower allegations that were published for the first time, or news that been published in 2019. So in addition to wanting to see all this additional information that I talked about in this 2-page document, I also think it's fundamentally wrong for us, or it's a mistake, to confine our conversation about OneCare or any reform effort to a question of how we pay doctors, whether it's fee-for-service or capitation or some combination of the two. And I don't think that matter really addresses the root cause of the affordability crisis that Mike Fisher addressed, or at least touched on, when he spoke to us in December. I've also been looking at Green Mountain Care Board's growth scenarios, cost growth scenarios, and they're anticipating that they may be spending more than their all-payer model target sets. 4.3, I believe, is the number, as opposed to what's actually in the contract in the all-payer model of 3.5. And what's particularly concerning to me is that their best estimate for cost estimates for the commercial population, see a cost increase as high as 6%. So again, I have absolutely no qualms spending more time, good time, thinking about, researching, talking about OneCare Vermont. I think an opportunity this board has not had a chance to do yet. But at the same time, I think we've done a lot of good work here in-house that we should revisit. The Altaran project being one of them. Return to that report, look at ways in which we might be able to implement some of the promising developments I think that report pointed us toward. We don't have to be sitting idle while this debate goes on about whether OneCare Vermont can improve quality or lower cost. We can be doing things ourselves, and I think we already laid that foundation in 2018 and 2019, and I'd just like us to revisit it, to have an in-depth discussion as a board about it, and that the management team be charged with looking for ways to implement some of the recommendations from Altaran and Prometheus that we think would benefit our membership. So for all those reasons, I would recommend that we spend time in 2020 doing more homework, seeing how things sugar out with OneCare Vermont, at the legislature, at the Green Mountain Care Board, with the auditor, with the first federal evaluation of the all-payer model that is, I believe, now underway by an organization called NORC, that I first learned about when I attended a Green Mountain Care Board hearing. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm happy to take any questions you have about the document.
This is really not, Mark, not for you to answer definitively, but if there were a motion to effectuate your recommendation, it would be in the first paragraph?
I believe something similar to that, or paraphrased of it, yes.
You could probably use that wording after I recommend. Okay. Did you want to jump in?
I would.
Okay.
So, Mark, I appreciate everything that you put in here. I cannot profess to fully understand and have any level of expertise on this, but I am gonna make a motion to the contrary, and maybe it won't go anywhere, but I'd like to just be able to speak to it. So, my motion is that VEHI does adopt into the all-payer model via risk sharing with OneCare as part of the Blue Cross Blue Shield network effective January 1st, and task the management team to develop additional performance measures to hold Blue Cross Blue Shield Vermont accountable for that initiative. And the measures will be provided to the board for our consideration, I'll say by June of this year. I sat through those presentations. There were many things about that I found very compelling. Again, I can't profess to say I got every single piece of it. Listening to 3 different speakers talk from, I don't want to say 3 different perspectives, but certainly 3 different positions, I think, 3 different seats. I think, to me, that made a compelling case for us, for VEHI to engage in that. And I don't see, I see the risk to VEHI of, you know, of this as minimal, and to me, it's a modest risk-sharing arrangement that Blue Cross Blue Shield developed with no administrative fees, and that seems reasonable. And that what it would allow the management team to do is have the opportunity to use the information gained and the opportunity to report, collaborate with Blue Cross Blue Shield and OneCare